when Gutenberg and his followers perfected movable type, you suddenly could produce much, much, much more material than ever before. So they printed a lot of Bibles, and then all of a sudden Europe had all the Bibles it could use in any given year, something that had never happened before. And so they had this huge amount of excess capacity and no new material that needed to be printed. And the solution they hit on was quite world-changingly dramatic, which is they decided to start printing books that no one had ever read before. We have the word novel to describe novels because the word comes from when novelty itself was new. Right? Almost any book you would want to print in 1400 was a book that had been venerated for 1,000 years. Right? By 1500, you've got stuff that is literally hot off the presses. The downside of this is that if you're printing a book that no one has ever read before, maybe no one wants to read it, and there's no good way to know. But you got to print all the copies in advance to sell them, and if you don't sell them, you're out all the money. And if you do that a couple of times in a row, you're out of business. So all of a sudden, the printer, whose main responsibility was operating this piece of equipment, became the publisher, whose responsibility was to decide what should be printed on the printing press in the first place. That accident, through an enormous number of subsequent kinds of media, films and magazines and books and television and radio, someone had to figure out how to manage the risk of what should we broadcast today, what should we show in our movie theater, what should go in this month's magazine, meant that publisher decides model stayed true for 500 years. Right? It was a basic fact of the public media environment that you had to have someone willing to bear the risk. And the minute you had a medium where you don't have to spend a lot of money up front in order to have a public voice, a medium like we have today, that accident gets undone. Doesn't matter that half a millennium of cultural practice is built up around it. I think there's a kind of a glum realization that the accident of the economics of media made the publisher's control of what got said in public, that accident is done now. And that the competitive landscape doesn't include silence on the part of the amateurs, and it will never include silence on the part of the amateurs again. And the technical change to do that was quite trivial. The cultural ramifications of that change, they were huge, because the media landscape we had in the 20th century literally cannot stand the shock of inclusion we're currently living through, where all of a sudden everybody's got a public voice. And we're seeing the social effects of that accident ending.
Read and watch more from Clay Shirky at btnn.tv.